Connecticut Scuba Academy is a non-profit volunteer educational organization that provides unique vocational and educational opportunities in multiple fields of marine science and conservation. We offer training and research opportunities to nonprofits, public and private schools, educational facilities, clubs, and after-school programs. The education the Academy provides is unique and hands-on. Our programs complement the curriculum of the school or organization we are working with, and provide educational opportunities to continue in after-school and summer programs. History of scuba diving. A brief history of diving from breath hold to modern rebreathers. Scuba, or self-contained, underwater, breathing, apparatus, was coined by the U.S. Navy underwater demolition team in the 1950s. The first record of diving is traced back to Gilgamesh, 3000 BC. The story given is how he dives to retrieve oysters. The next reference is to Glaucus, a Greek sponge diver 2500 to 1400 BC. He drowns and is remembered as a god. We then have ancient Assyrian and Persian friezes, dated to 865 BC, depicting swimmers with some sort of breathing or flotation bag. By 600 BC, sponge diving was an important industry in Greece as depicted in pottery of the time. Two famous sponge divers, Cyana and her father Cilias, date back to 500 BC. The story is, they were working as divers for the Persian king, Xerxes, to recover sunken treasure. Because Xerxes was at war with the Greeks, he took them prisoners and would not let them return to their homeland. During a violent storm one night, Cyana and Cilias dove into the sea and cut loose the anchor of the Persian fleet, sending them adrift against the rocky shore. This is the first record of divers being utilized in warfare. A practice used to this day. Leonardo da Vinci. 1500. Leonardo da Vinci, in the 1500s, drafted many diving contraptions including the first known scuba equipment. Da Vinci later gave up on his scuba apparatus in favor of the diving bell, which offered endurance and protection, before the invention of compressed air. In 1622, a Spanish treasure fleet was scattered and sunk by a hurricane near the Florida Keys. The Spanish recovered some of the treasure, but most was lost to time. Storms continued to plague these treasure transports from 1715 through 1733, with hundreds of sailors lost. The economic losses to Spain accelerated their demise as a world power. Otto von Heurecke. 1602 to 1686. Heurecke invented the first air pump to study the phenomenon of vacuum and the role of air in combustion and respiration. His invention allowed air for the first time to be pumped to greater than 1 atmosphere, to supply divers underwater or to be stored as compressed gas. Giovanni Borelli. 1680. Giovanni imagined a closed-circuit rebreather. His drawings show a bag using chemicals to clean the air, allowing divers to rebreathe the air in the bag. In his drawings he also depicted what appear to be the first fins, and a submarine. Friedrich von Drieberg. 1808. Drieberg's invention, the Triton, had a reservoir of air. The diver drew air from the reservoir by tipping his head forward. The Triton could not contain sufficient pressure for any duration. It still had to be supplied with air from surface hoses. The Dean brothers. 1819 to 1830. Charles and John Dean, merchant seamen, designed a smoke helmet to fight fires on ships. The invention failed but became the blueprint for the most successful diving helmet to date, the hard hat, or standard dress. The brothers did not have the capital to pursue the development and manufacture of the device, so they approached their employer, who contracted a German coppersmith and inventor in London, Augustus Seaby. Augustus Seaby. 1788 to 1872. Seaby's interest turned to diving after producing smoke helmets. By 1836 he introduced the concept of closed dress, where the helmet is sealed to the suit to prevent flooding. Seabee's system was so successful, it was used in the salvage of the Royal George in 1839. This won Seabee the endorsement of the Royal Navy, and established his firm Seabee, and later Seabee Gorman and Company, as the leading manufacturer of commercial dive equipment in the world. Seabee Gorman and Company was recently dissolved, on the 9th of April 2019. William James. 1825. Many efforts were underway simultaneously to develop dive equipment. In 1825 William James developed what many consider the first true self-contained breathing apparatus. It utilized tanks of compressed air and full diving dress with helmet. Its limits on depth and time kept it from being adopted by commercial divers, who preferred Seabee's surface-supplied units. Rouquayrol and Denayrouze. 1864. Rouquayrol and Denayrouze developed the first demand valve. The diver was equipped with a tank on his back, which was fed from the surface. The diver received air from an ambient pressure compensating demand valve. The system allowed the diver to breathe with minimal effort. It went into commercial production in 1867. This was the first demand valve in history controlled by the diver's respiration, and very similar to what modern scuba divers use today. Jules Verne. 1870. Jules Verne created intrigue for the undersea world with his book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In his novel he equipped Captain Nemo and his divers in the Rouquayrol Denayrouze diving system. The Eads Bridge in St. Louis and the Brooklyn Bridge in New York introduced caisson disease or the bends for the first time. The Eads Bridge physician and Dr. Andrew Smith, the Brooklyn Bridge physician, both published reports of their experience in 1871 and 1873. This gave the clinical labels to the physiological reaction to being exposed to compressed air for long periods of time. This was eventually transferred over to diving, when diving systems became able to reach the depth and bottom time to cause this reaction. This physiological reaction is to remain one of the primary occupational hazards to plague divers for the next 25 years. Henry Fleurs. 1876. Using oxygen, Henry Fleurs revisited the closed-circuit rebreather idea in 1876. His self-contained system was used for working in smoke and toxic air environments, and for short periods underwater. Fleurs eventually went to work for Seabee Gorman, who put his design into production. Paul Bert. 1878. French physiologist Paul Bert was able to tie many loose ends together in the evolving field of diving. In his monumental work Barometric Pressure, using simple experiments he recognized nitrogen as the cause of caisson disease, concluded it was the same affliction as decompression sickness in divers, and even predicted it would occur at altitude. He recommended breathing oxygen as a remedy, same as we do today. His experience with oxygen toxicity convulsions under pressure were accredited to him as the Paul Bert effect. John Scott Haldane. 1908. John Haldane provided stage decompression and the first usable dive tables. This was a substantial leap forward in diving. Draeger. 1909. In 1909, the Draeger Company, a German manufacturer of gas valves, firefighting equipment and mine safety devices, created a self-contained dive system combining a hard hat-style helmet with a backpack containing compressed oxygen. Draeger took the lead and developed the first modern rebreathers from 1917 on. Combining tanks of compressed air and oxygen, the first nitrox, the devices were sold for use of depths up to 40 meters or 130 feet. Yves Le Prieur. 1926. Yves Le Prieur, an officer in the French Navy, patents a dive system based on compressed air, carried in tanks. The device feeds air to a full face mask worn by the diver. This was the first system to open scuba to the public, and resulted in the first scuba club. DESCO. 1937. DESCO, an American diving equipment and salvage company, developed a self-contained mixed gas rebreather system. It used a compressed mixture of helium and oxygen with a fully sealed dive suit. DESCO was also the manufacturer of the U.S. Navy Mark V hard hat, which was in production until 1983. December 1, 1937. DESCO diver Max Knoll set a new world record using the DESCO system to a depth of 420 feet. The idea of swim fins have been around for ages. Leonardo da Vinci and Giovanni Borelli both developed drawings. Benjamin Franklin built fins for both his hands and feet, though they were not very successful. In 1914, Frenchman Louis de Corlou made the first public demonstrations of his fins. Corlou received a patent in 1937 for his design. De Corlou then issued a license to Owen Churchill to begin producing his fins in the United States in 1939. The Churchill fins are still produced today. Churchill gets credit by many for inventing the dive fin, but the credit rightfully belongs to Corlou, whose design predates Churchill's by 25 years. Jacques Cousteau and Emile Gagnan. 1943. Cousteau and Gagnan produce what becomes one of the world's most popular scuba devices, the aqualung. In 1951, a European company manufactured a valve with a reserve mechanism. This valve was designated the J valve. Its non-reserve companion was designated the K valve. The designations they were known by were simply the designation given them in the catalog. We still use this designation for the K valve being used today. The J valve has fallen out of favor with the use of pressure gauges. 1955, Sam Davison introduces dial-a-breath. A double hose, double diaphragm regulator, complete with built-in low-pressure reserve and variable breathing resistance. Davison then goes on to build his own manufacturing company. Decor. 1956. University of California invent neoprene. This is a major step in diver comfort. 1956. Denzel James Dockery invents the red and white diver down flag. Maurice Fenzy. 1961. Fenzy is a scuba diving and industrial breathing equipment design and manufacturing firm. It started in or before 1920 in France. Finally, Honeywell bought them out. In 1961, the company's founder and owner, Maurice Fenzy, invented a diver's adjustable buoyancy life jacket. 1962 to 1966. Cousteau's habitats. Created under direction from Jacques Cousteau, the Continental Shelf Station program, CONSHELF, ran from 1962 to 1965 and was comprised of 3 separate habitats, installed to research the physical and mental effects of sustained underwater habitation and saturation diving. A steel cylinder some 16 feet long and 8 feet in diameter, CONSHELF 1 sat in 30 feet of water near Marseille, France and was home to 2 aquanauts for 7 days. (1964). U.S. Navy launches SeaLab I. SeaLab, experimental program sponsored by the U.S. Navy intended to determine whether humans could live and work successfully, for long periods of time at the bottom of the ocean. The name of the program also refers to any of the 3 experimental underwater habitats deployed in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans between 1964 and 1969 as part of the program. (1965) SeaLab II. 1969 SeaLab III. These elaborate underwater dwellings called habitats were placed on the ocean floor at depths up to 180 meters, 600 feet, in which divers, called aquanauts, lived under the pressures existing at these depths for various lengths of time, often leaving the habitat for several hours to work on the ocean floor. The program was terminated in 1969 after the death of a diver from carbon monoxide asphyxiation during a mission to repair a leak in one of the helium tanks. 1963. The first electric dive computer. SOS Poseidon 5 wrist computer. 1983. Orca Edge. The first consumer dive computers were very limited and expensive. Modern dive computers have come a long way in price, size and capability. They are very affordable and easy to use and a vital part of almost every diver's gear. The way an individual learns to dive has also changed drastically. It's moved from private clubs and weeks, if not months of mentoring, to a highly efficient retail business of earning weekend certifications. There are between 2.7 to 3.5 million active scuba divers in the US, with as many as 6 million active scuba divers worldwide. Most stats are hard to come by. If you take into account dive equipment sales, education and training and tourism, scuba diving is an industry worth $20 to $30 billion annually. However, participation is actually down from the heyday of diving back in the 70s and 80s. It's hard to explain the decline in the sport of diving when certifications can be earned in a weekend, and the cost of equipment has dropped so dramatically. There are many other individuals and organizations who have influenced both commercial, military, and recreational diving. Many advances were being worked on simultaneously in different parts of the world. We tried to highlight the most influential advancements in diving for you. We hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Connecticut Scuba Academy is a non-profit educational organization.